Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome everybody. We are going to start lecture number 29, and this is about the last process of risk management as far as projects are concerned, and that is monitor and control risk. We had talked about the complexity, a part of project management, and we had talked that the risk is very important part of project management, and risk can influence the project's success and failure. Before we go towards this lecture, let's have the summary of the previous lecture. The other day we were talking about how to plan the response for a risk. What do you mean by planning response for risk? And then we had talked about the critical success factors for planning risk responses. Then we had talked about the processes, plan risk process, and we had talked about inputs, tools and technique, and outputs. And then in the last we had discussed about some strategies, strategies for positive risk, strategies for negative risk, how to exploit positive risk and opportunities, and how to mitigate or eliminate the negative risk, the threats. We had talked about that the risk response process is iterative in its nature. So it is not the thing, we can actually have risk response even after identifying risk, okay? So identify risk is the second process, and after that we can actually go straight towards planning risk response, and we have some basic actions decided over there after identifying. So we have identified this risk and what it would be the probable action which can be considered based on our previous lectures, our previous projects, previous studies, previous understanding, and then we do carry out some analysis, and we carry out qualitative risk analysis, and then that qualitative risk analysis leads us to three things. First thing is watch list, the second thing is quantitative risk analysis, and third thing is plan risk response. So the one who are very high as far as qualitative risk is concerned, we actually go and carry out quantitative risk analysis for those risks only, and which are medium to low, we actually take those risks and we carry out some response. We do decide what we have to do. So we are having 4 strategies for positive risk, 4 for negative risk. So we choose one of them, considering what type of risk it is. And the lowest risk, very low risk are placed in watch list for further good analysis. And then the risks which have been actually gone to quantitative risk analysis, after quantification, they are even submitted for planning responses. So we are having 3 things, and that is identifying, qualitative, quantitative. So we actually lead from this to qualitative and response. But remember, this response is only actions. It is a list of actions, and we have to carry out the qualitative analysis until unless we are so sure we are not in need of any analysis, then we can actually plan it very quickly. But most of the time we do carry out the qualitative first, and from qualitative we are going to quantitative, and then watch list, and the third one is responses. And from quantitative we go to responses. So to reach to responses, we can have responses after identifying risk, we can have responses after qualitative analysis, and after quantitative analysis. So we can have same destination even after following through different things over there. So this is what we have talked about in previous lecture. Let's move towards today's lecture, and that is monitor and control risk part. Okay, so monitor and control risk is the process of implementing risk response plans. So whatever we have actually discussed over there. So we had a list of risks, their analysis, and their probable responses we have to carry out. So those plans may be very elaborative and may become risk response plans, though they are part of risk register. But we had talked about that these responses may be put separately and be called as risk response plans, and we are having those, and after the risk has occurred, the event has triggered, and risk is there. So one risk owner and risk action owner, they are actually working on that risk. But basing on what are they working over there? So we had already planned for some creative ways to attend those risks. So by that time we are actually implementing risk response plans. So that may be very preventive, proactively, and that may be very reactive. So implementation of risk response plan is actually is part of monitoring and control risk. And then tracking identified risks. So it is not only about identifying risks and then making some analysis and then deciding about few plans for them. We have to keep tracking them, just like if something has happened, so that is pretty much there. But if something is going to happen, so we will keep pursuing that thing. So just like that, just like this thing, we will actually keep tracking risk. Okay, so this is risk 1. And 2 and 3. So risk 3 will happen after 3 months when activity X will start and will be over when activity Y is over. The duration of X plus Y, duration of X and duration of Y is equal to 6 weeks. So that risk will be active in only 6 weeks, right? So after the 6 weeks, the risk is gone because the risk was associated with 2 activities, let's say X and Y, and those activities have been completed successfully. So that's okay. So when activity X is started, that does not mean that the risk will be started as well, because it is a risk is associated with the probability. So the event may happen or may not happen, right? So if it is not happening the first day, but then you will keep tracking, okay? So if something has not happened the first day, that does not mean that won't happen on the second day or third day or fourth or fifth or the last day even, okay? So we have to be very careful and vigilant throughout this time period, 6 weeks, okay? So if the activity has not happened for first 4 weeks out of 6 weeks, yes, the probability has been a bit decreased. There may be a chance, but in many cases, the probability may have increased, you know. So we were able to control all the contributing factors by this point in time after 4 weeks, but now we have exhausted all majority of resources available with us, and now the risk has more probability that this will occur. So this is an example for such scenarios. But for few scenarios, and most of the scenarios, this is for few of the scenarios, and most of the scenarios, if something has not happened in 4 weeks, so we are having good idea, okay, so this thing is not going to happen in remaining 2 weeks, okay? So we can decrease the probability accordingly, but remember, there is one point: you won't keep your eyes off that risk, okay? We will keep tracking those risks. So this is another part of monitoring and controlling risk, okay? So monitoring residual risks, okay? So what are residual risks? We have talked about in previous lectures. So these risks are which we should give proper care. So they may stem again, and you know, they may become problematic for the project team. So so to reduce their problematic behavior, the project team should carry out necessary actions. So we have to keep tracking, identify risk, as well as monitoring residual risks. So identifying new risk. So you may say that this part, identifying new risk, is part of identifying risk process, but over there that is also a part of. So process of monitoring and controlling risk is actually take care of that, and evaluating risk process effectiveness throughout the project. And then okay, we had talked about that there will be 10 risks. There will be 10 risks in project, and the impact on cost will be 3%. Let's say we are having this data set and nothing else. So 10 risks are there, and cost impact is 3%. And then we have identified, well, there were actual 100 risks, and cost effect was 23%. And the second data point is 9 risks and 2.9% cost effect. Now, if that is the case, actual case, that was the planning, and if that is the actual case, okay, you are doing good. Now, you may have very good statistics available to have, you know, variance analysis. But for that, I mean, 10 to 100 risk and 3 to 23%, that is huge. Okay, so the effectiveness of the project is, you know, somewhat. So you should also have these parameters set for your project. Okay, what will be the control limits as far as our effectiveness of risk management processes is concerned. So we will set some key performance indicators for that thing, and then we will keep evaluating our project according to those indicators. So this is about the definition of monitoring and control risk process. So Planned risk responses that are included in the project management plan are executed during the life cycle of the project, but the project work should be continuously monitored for new, changing, and outdated risk. So there are three things: new, changing, and outdated risk. So as far as new risks are concerned, so you will demand contingency for those. One of the mitigation may be contingency. You ask for the contingency reserve for those new risks, and then you have to carry out qualitative risk analysis and at times quantitative risk analysis, and then you plan it. After that, you may be in need of dollars, additional dollars, and time or quality standards. So you may be in need of those. Okay. For changing risk, what do you mean by changing risk? What do you think of changing risk? Risk do change. So if you remember the basic definition of risk, and there are two characteristics of risk, and that is probability and impact. So the risk remain there or be same there, but the probability gets changed and impact gets changed. Okay, so probability may be increased or decreased, and the impact may be increased or decreased in the life cycle of the project with the passage of time by having more information and having better control over project. So risk may be changing in terms of these two characteristics. So we have talked about the duration part, so but that is part of impact. So we can assume that there are two characteristics available for risk, and those characteristics may be changing. That is about changing risks. Okay, so we have to continuously monitor the what would be the changing of characteristics of the risk. Okay, and then outdated risk. What is the big point? Why to consider those? I mean, okay, that is quite logical. Seems logical that the new risks they can actually affect the project, and then changing characteristics. Okay, so if the probability is increased or impact is increased, and that is not apprehended by the project team, then that would be a problem. But what would be the issue with outdated risk? Those are gone. So what is the big point considering those or monitoring those? Well, that is not the case. Over there you were actually, so I have written one probable plan over there, but then there are risks. Those are outdated. Okay, for those you must have something available with you, like resources assigned or contingency. So we assume you are having contingency attached. Now these risks are gone, and the contingency reserve set for those risks is available. Like initially you had planned for like 5 lakh rupees, 500,000, and now the risks, those 3 or 4 or 5 risks are gone. The risks were attached to some activities, and those activities have been completed successfully, and hence there was no deviation, and hence the contingency is a saving. Now, where will this contingency go? If your answer is we will keep this money with us for the new risks, your answer is not the right answer. Okay, ideally, and this should go back to program manager, and he will this program manager, he or she will keep this thing under his or her command as and the management reserve is actually kept by this senior level guy. So for outdated risk, this money which was actually placed will go over there. So we have to keep an eye. We are actually sending the money back to the senior people. Do we have any chance of these risks occurring, right? So then if those are closed risks, closed and active risks, so these are actives. So if we put close over there, we should be very careful. So if those are closed, then the contingency reserves or resources should be released as early as possible for the better management, okay? So the effectiveness of project risk management depends upon the way the approved plans are carried out. There are approved plans available. What do you mean by approved plan? Remember, we had how many knowledge areas available with us? 10. And for every knowledge area, we have a plan. And then we have configuration management plan and process improvement management plan, but scope management plan, time management plan, cost management plan, quality management plan, all those plans. So after preparing all these plans, we collect those and we will have this comprehensive integrated project management plan, and that is approved by the senior people, okay? So those plans are then carried out, okay? So if these plans are approved ones, and then there are variations, you know, the projects are unique entities and they inherent change in themselves, so they are taken to carry out, you know, some changes. So approved plans include initial plans plus the approved changes as well. So these plans should be executed correctly. What do you mean by correctly? So correctly means in the way which is stated in the plans themselves, not the way, you know, something is written differently in the plans and you are actually executing the plans differently. So that is not the case over there. So the plan should be executed in the way which is actually been written and approved by those people who have approved those plans. So this is we call execution correctly. Reviewed and updated regularly. So reviewed by the senior management, the project manager, the team at least, and updated regularly. So what is a big point if your plan version 1.0 and that was having budget 100 million and then there was scope cut and there was schedule shortening and the budget was reduced to 60 million, and then you are carrying out some EVM as earned value management system and you are considering BAC as 100 million. What will happen over there then? Or BAC 60 million. So if you are considering this, you are misleading the whole concept, okay? You are misleading the stakeholders, you are misleading your client and customer, and you are misleading your own self and your team. So what is the big point if you are not using this thing, and why you are not using this? Because that is not part of your plan, hence that means you are not updating your plan regularly, okay? So that has already been approved, and that has been, this approval has not been reflected in any of your document. So that should be taken care of, okay? So if this is carried out correctly, the invested effort will be rewarded and future projects will benefit from this project's experience. And why and how this thing actually plans execution correctly reviewed and upgrading will result into the betterment of the future. So you will have plan version 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, then major change, so 2.0, 2.1, 3.0, so and then 4. So there were version number like 7 versions of your plan, or like 27 versions, right? So after why these versions, you know? So you must be having some change. So there must be some change over there. Okay, so hence you are having this version then. Okay, so you were having initially this, and then you are having this. So there must be something have happened over there. So basing on that change, or on the basis of that change, you are having different versions, right? So if you are having those versions available with you, and you are having reasons for those changes, you can actually plan well in upcoming projects. Okay, so that won't be, your templates will be improved, your whole process will be improved. So in this fashion you will have a curve as shown over there in so you will have something like very good understanding, and you will go upside as far as organization is concerned. And the objective of monitor and control risk. So the primary objective of risk monitoring and controlling are to track identifying risks, monitor residual risks, identify new risks, so ensure that risk response plans are executed at the appropriate time, and evaluate their effectiveness throughout the project life cycle. So most of the things we have talked in detail. So just summing it up, you know, we have to identify risks, residual risks, and identify new risks, and then we have to actually take care of if the responses are actually imparted or implemented on time, and the whole system is performing effectively. What is the need to carry out this thing? So the monitor and control risk process applies techniques such as variance and trend analysis, which require the use of performance information generated during project execution. Other purpose of monitor and control risk process are to determine if project assumptions are still valid. Now that is very important. That is very, very important. So let's say we were having this benefit cost ratio is equal to 1.2, and you know benefit cost ratio mean, so benefits and cost. So if we assume there were 120 million benefits and there was 100 million cost, right? So there was some risk. We were doing good, and there are some risk, and we were able to identify those risks very promptly, and then we have planned some responses, and responses cost 21 million. Now, but your initial cost was 100, so now your cost, revised cost, is 121 million. But you have taken up your project based on this information, benefit cost ratio 1.2, right? Now, what is your new BCR? And that is 120 by 121, which is less than 1, okay? So by that time, the project has been, has not been that profitable. There may be other parameters, but again, if we have selected our project on this very alternative economic parameter or financial parameter, then your assumptions are gone, and your reason to take up that project has been seriously undermined by this fact that the risks has actually contributed a lot, and negative risks they have contributed a lot. So now your project is not valid, and you may consider abandoning that project as well. So then analysis shows an assessed risk has changed or can be retired. So this is another objective of monitoring control. So you want to have assessed risk, you want to keep an eye, and how can you keep an eye if you do not use this monitoring and control? Risk management policies and procedures are being followed. So for that we actually carry out monitoring and control risk. And then contingency reserves of cost and schedule should be modified in alignment with the current risk assessment. So new risks have been added, hence you will demand more contingency. Some of old risks have been retired, so you will you will leave or surrender reserve for program manager, and then a few risks have been the probability impact has been increased, so you will demand extra money, and few risks probability and impact has been reduced, so you will surrender the money for those. Okay, so this is kind of the need we actually carry out this monitoring and control process. Okay, so how do we do this thing? Risk trigger conditions. So that is very important. So this guy over there is very curious. What is happening? What is the cause? Why these blocks are been spilled over there? Or so these are there are some triggering conditions. So for those triggering conditions, he will keep an eye on. Okay, so for each risk or set of risks for which a contingent response has been defined, the corresponding set of trigger conditions should have been specified. So all risks, when we were having this risk register available, so we were having like serial number, and then we were having like risk, and then cause, and that cause triggering condition. What triggers that risk? Okay, so if we can actually have very good idea of the cause or triggering condition, we can have very good control over risk, right? So, and who has this responsibility? It is the responsibility of the action owner to ensure that these conditions are effectively monitored and that the corresponding actions are carried out as defined in timely manner. So those triggering conditions should be monitored by a risk action owner, and then in addition to response actions and trigger conditions, a mechanism for measuring the effectiveness of the response is provided by planned risk response process. So the risk action owner should keep the risk owner aware of the status of the response actions, so that the risk owner can decide when the risk has been effectively dealt with, or whether additional actions needed to be planned and implemented in future or upcoming. So you have to keep measuring your risks, and hence you will be having good control over your plan risk trigger conditions. Okay. So risk reassessment, and that is very, very important. So we plan the things, then we implement, then we do carry out assessments, and we revise the things, and so this is kind of assessment cycle. So the project manager should ensure that, and in that case a risk manager as well, should ensure that the periodic risk reassessments, including risk identification, analysis and response planning, is repeated at reasonable intervals. Typical reasons for risk reassessment are given over there. We are going to talk on that, but let's talk about what do you mean by reasonable intervals. So different people, they do have different standards and different things available with them. So a few of the project managers, they actually carry out risk identification with a frequency of weekly meetings. Others, if the projects are very huge, so bi-weekly. And then responses. And before responses, we are having analysis. So for analysis, there are two types, qualitative and quantitative. So for quantitative, those are being carried out after like 3 weeks, and qualitative after 2 weeks. And for complex projects, that frequency may even be reduced to 1 week, and quantitative for 2 weeks. Okay, Monte Carlo simulation and stuff like that, we had talked about that. Okay, and responses. Now, what would be the frequency of responses after 2 weeks? So the frequency may be different, and we have talked about, and where we find what would be the frequency, where should we find this information. So that information is available over plan, risk, response. Over there we have decided about the what would be the frequency of carrying out this reassessment. So reassessment is carried out for identification, analysis, and response planning. And identification is, about new risks, and then analysis, probability impact things, and then qualitative, quantitative, response planning, what should we do. So this is all done in reassessment. And why we do that? So the reasons are listed over there. So occurrence of a major or unexpected risk. So if something has happened and out of nowhere this risk has surfaced, and that is may have quite an impact on our object, one of the objective or more objectives. So that is a major risk. Or unexpected risk that was not anticipated, but the risk is over there. So we have to carry out some analysis for that. And need to analyze a complex change request. Now this is very important. Whenever there is a change, we are actually changing our management plan. The assumptions have been changed. So the basis on which risk identification was carried out has been changed, and hence we will carry out a reassessment of the risks. Okay. Phase and review, that is a very good point where we carry out comprehensive reassessment of the whole process, identification, analysis, and responses. So this gives a very good idea of how the things are being doing by that point in time. So for complex project, remember we do have different phases. And within these phases we are having initiation, planning, execution, and closure, and then throughout we are having monitoring and control. So after this point we are closing this phase. So that is project closure or phase closure process. Over there these risk reassessments are very helpful, so that we can learn new things, and we can use that learning for phase number 2 and subsequently phase number 3 and stuff like that. And then project replanning or major plan elaboration. Okay, so we were having some control accounts, and those control accounts were divided into work packages, and those work packages were further divided into activities. So this was not work package, that was planning package, and now the information has been given over there. Now we can plan up to the required and desired level this planning package. So after planning, after the information is there. After elaboration, now there is a need, if we are actually planning for this planning package, we should also plan for the risk as well. So this is also very important when it comes to assessment of the risk. Periodic review to ensure that the information remains current. Now that is very important. Decisions made on outdated or information that is not updated are not good decisions. We have talked about that. Okay, so project closure and risk register. At project closure, the project manager should ensure that a description has been given of the closure of every risk in the risk register. For example, which risk was not able to occur or did not occur, and the one who is occurred and contingency plan invoked, and occurred and impact to the project scope, times, cost and quality, etc. So we actually do consider कि कौन सा रिस्क जो है वो हुआ ही नहीं है, कौन सा रिस्क का जो हुआ और हमने उसको अटेंड कर लिया, और कौन सा रिस्क था जो हमसे अटेंड नहीं हुआ और जिसने अल्टीमेटली कि कुछ चीज़ों को मुतासर बहरहाल किया, कॉस्ट को किया, टाइम को किया, या कुछ चीज़ों को उसने किया. Okay, so for that, critical success factors for monitor and control risk process are being discussed. So critical success factors relate to maintaining risk awareness throughout the project and include the characteristics and capabilities are integrating risk monitoring and control with project monitoring and control. So you do remember the controlling processes are scope control, schedule control, cost control, quality control, quality assurance and control, and risk control, and then administer procurement. So these are and manage people. See, so these are processes which ultimately contributing or making project monitoring and control. So what you want to have this thing included in these bunch of activities. Okay, so this pool will make a very good project monitoring and control pool. Okay, so you want to have included this risk monitoring and control a part of it. Okay, and then continuously monitor risk trigger conditions. So for a very good understanding, you should keep evaluating that and then maintaining risk awareness among the stakeholders. So we are going to talk in detail in relevant slides. Okay, let's start with integrating risk monitoring and control with project monitoring and control. From the start, the project management plan should include the actions required to monitor and control project risk. This should be set up early in the project planning cycle and then adjusted in view of the risk responses planning decisions. So remember, we had discussed about the few steps we carry out for proper planning, and that is the first step was collecting the requirements for detailed requirements, and then scope statement, and then acquiring team, and then creating WBS, and then we were having decide what to purchase, and then we define activities, and then we have these network diagrams, and then activity time and cost, and then CPM and schedule, and then we develop budgets, and then we develop quality plans, and then process improvement plan. Then we define roles and responsibilities, hence we plan communication, and after that we have risk processes, risk identification, analysis, responses, and after that we go back and have iterations. So whatever we've got after the risk management, we go back again to the first step, and then we will have again to the, and then we will go back again, and hence in this form we will improve our project management plan. So that's why this project management plan thing is iterative process. Okay, so once risk response planning has been carried out, the project schedule should include all the agreed upon responses, related actions, so that they can be carried out as a normal part of project execution and tracked accordingly. So what you want to do over there is you have carried out necessary risk management processes, and now you want those things included in schedule. So activities are included in schedule, and the costs are made part of the budget. So all the processes in cost, time, quality are updated through that. So this is kind of a very good integrated effort. So after that you will have a very good cyclic thing, and hence you will have a shape of kind of iterations, right? So this is how we integrate our risk monitoring and control, and then continuously monitor risk trigger conditions. So if you can see this structure over there, the whole structure is placed and very delicately balanced on one pole. So if this moves, the whole structure will shatter, and then one of the, likewise, if this moves or this moves, so whatever the ball, if this moves, or like this moves this way and this moves this way, so again, so we have to keep an eye on everything, right? So triggering conditions are the movement of these balls over there, as far as this shape is concerned, or diagram is concerned. Okay, so we have to keep a good eye and continuously monitoring these triggering conditions. Okay, so risk response planning will have defined a set of actions to be carried out as part of the project schedule, as well as actions whose execution is dependent on predefined trigger conditions. So checking for specifically defined risks that may trigger conditional responses is the responsibility of the risk action owner, in close collaboration with risk owner under the overall authority of the project manager. And tracking trigger conditions and the corresponding matrices are defined during the plan risk responses process. So tools are required to evaluate and track these conditions against the project baseline or specified thresholds based on actual status. They can be chosen to provide information or risk related to the deliverables, such as performance, as well as on project related features such as time and cost. And then we have to maintain risk awareness. Okay, so risk management reports should be a regular item on every status meeting agenda. So that is very, very important. And so if you've been asked, okay, what will be included in every status meeting, and that is risk and issues. Okay, so to ensure that all team members remain aware of the importance of risk management, and to ensure that it is fully integrated into all the project management decisions. So remember, the quality is not inspected in, it is built in. So this concept is more or less in conformance with that concept. So sponsors' feedback also motivates the project team by demonstrating senior level interest in project risk management. So that is also very, very important. So then monitor and control risk, the process. So we are having these risk register as input, and then we are having project management plan, work performance information and performance reports. These are inputs, and then we carry out risk reassessment. We have talked a lot on that. Audits, risk audit, variance and trend analysis, technical performance measurement, and reserve analysis, status meetings, and then we are having outputs, risk register updates, organization processes, asset updates, change requests, and project management plan updates, project document updates. So these are few things. So let's start with work performance information. So work performance information related to various performance results includes but not limited to deliverable status, schedule progress, and cost incurred. So what do you mean by schedule progress? So that is about schedule activities related to risk management and hence overall schedule. So if the overall schedule is doing good, then your risk strategy is performing well. Similarly is the case with the cost deliverable status. Okay, so how many deliverables have been accepted by the client, how many were delivered, and how many were accepted, what is the percentage. So that is that information is actually very important for monitoring and controlling risk process. And then we carry out risk audits. Okay, so risk audit examine and document the effectiveness of risk responses in dealing with identified risk and their root causes, as well as the effectiveness of the risk management process. The project manager is responsible for ensuring that the risk audits are performed at an appropriate frequency as defined in project's risk management plan. Risk audits may be included during routine project review meetings, or separate risk audit meetings may be held. And we do carry out this variance and trend analysis. Many control processes employ variance analysis to compare the planned results to the actual results for the purposes of monitoring and controlling risk events. Trends in the project execution should be reviewed using performance information. And then earned value analysis and other methods of project variance and trend analysis, control charts and stuff like that may be used for monitoring overall project performance. And outcomes from these analyses may forecast potential deviation of the project at completion from cost and schedule targets. And deviations from the baseline plan may indicate the potential impact of threats or opportunities. And technical performance measurements, which is actually leading towards the success as shown over the figure or diagram over there. And then technical performance measurement compares technical accomplishments during project execution to the schedule of technical achievement. It requires the definition of the objective, quantifiable measures of the technical performance, which can be used to compare actual results against targets. Such technical performance measures may include weight, transaction, times, number of delivered defects, storage capacity, etc. And deviations such as demonstrating more or less functionality than planned at a milestone can help to forecast the degree of success in achieving the project scope. That is a reserve analysis, and that is very important. Okay, so over there you can see there a few people are working and they are putting pieces over there, and a few have been done, the other are laying, and one project manager is leading the activities. Okay, so throughout the execution of the project, some risk may occur with positive or negative impacts on budget or schedule, contingency reserves. Reserves analysis compares the amount of the contingency reserve remaining to the amount of the risk remaining at any time in the project in order to determine if the remaining reserve is adequate. And reserves may have been allocated separately to cover time-related and cost-related risks. So techniques are required that allow the project manager to assess at any point in the project whether these provide the required level of confidence in the success of the project. And then tools for managing time buffers should be closely integrated into project scheduling techniques, whereas those for managing cost should be compatible with the financial practices. Tools are required to identify trends and forecast future outcomes to determine whether the reserves will remain sufficient. Tools are also required for tracking progress and spending in a consolidated manner. And in the last but not the least, risk meetings. Project risk management should be an agenda item at periodic status meetings. The amount of time required for that item will vary depending upon the risks that have been identified, their priority and difficulty of response. The more often risk management is practiced, the easier it becomes. Frequent discussions about risk make it more likely that people will identify risks and opportunities. And then, basing on all these processes, the project documents upgradation will be done, and project documents that may be updated as a result of the control risk process include but are not limited to the risk register. Risk register updates may include outcomes of risk reassessments, risk audits, and periodic risk reviews, and then actual outcomes of the project's risk and of the risk responses. Organizational processes assets updates. So the risk management processes produce information that may be used for future projects and should be captured in the organizational processes assets. The organizational processes assets that may be updated include but are not limited to templates for risk management plan, including the probability and impact metrics and risk register, a risk breakdown structure, and lesson learned from the project risk management activities. And then the final control action of risk monitoring and controlling is to control and record actual data for future use. This includes all of the relevant information relating to risk management from start to finish for the project. The goal is to ensure that the significant risk management information is recorded to provide concrete data to the lesson learned process. And for that, we have for each identified risk or type of risk, whether it occurred and if so, when and how often, all relevant data should be recorded, impact effectiveness of detection and the response, and any unplanned additional actions that were carried out, effectiveness of avoidance or exploitation actions, effectiveness of transfer and sharing actions, unexpected or undocumented risks which occurred and data about them, effectiveness of risk mitigation and enhancement, occurrence of accepted threats or opportunities. So, this is it. Let's have the summary of this lecture. In this lecture, we have talked about the monitor and control risk and what are the objectives of this process. And we have talked about in detail about the risk trigger conditions. We have to keep continuous, very proactive eye on that. Then we have to keep reassessing the risk throughout the project life cycle. And then what are the success factors for monitoring and controlling risk. And then we have talked about the process inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. And we had talked about a few important things: meetings, contingency reserves, trend analysis, and then documenting the results of monitor and control risk for the organization, for the organizational process assets, for the risk register, and stuff like that. So this is it, And the end note is, you cannot control what happens to you, but you can control your attitude toward what happens to you. And in that, you will be mastering change rather than allowing it to master you. So that is it. I say thank you, good luck, and Allah Hafiz.